My name is Margie Geiser. I'm an education volunteer with JewishGen, and I have with me today Todd Holden, who is going to talk about his new course, The Nitty-Gritty of Genealogical Pre-Writing. How are you today, Todd?
I'm good, Margie. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So, one of the issues that we often encounter with students in our Jewish Gen courses is they like doing the work, but then they struggle with putting together a story. And as I understand it, that's key to the focus of your course.
Writing can be really intimidating for a lot of people, and even for seasoned writers, it can often be difficult just to get going. And so, with the pre-writing idea, we're recognizing that there's kinds of writing that's done that can help give you a step up in the writing process. Another way to think about it is that writing has a formal part that is the product, like a research report or a coffee table book. But then there's a lot of little writing that goes into those. And it can be anything from, summarizing a table to describing a photograph to actually putting a caption on a photograph. Then those are all separate writing processes. So in this class, we're focused on that part, and we call it the pre-writing process.
At Jewish Gen Education, we're really proud of our online classes, and specifically the way that our online classes combine building our students' genealogical research skills with individualized research guidance. So, can you describe how that works in this course?
The spotlight is in different places at different times in the class. So we've got sort of three distinct processes that we built into the course. During the class meeting, which occurs once a week on Sunday for 2 hours, students are doing some individual writing by themselves, but then they're bringing that writing back to the group, and the group is critiquing it. They're giving it sort of like non-judgmental evaluations in a way that's not threatening to the student, but also can be very helpful to them. And the students are incorporating some of those ideas along with ideas from the professor who's looking at their work from through their perspective. And then they're being given homework assignments to take home and work on, which sort of build on what's happening in the class. And then they're putting that in a portfolio that will be evaluated at the end of the 4 weeks. So we're really getting these three different kinds of engagement with the student, the other students, and the professor, and then working themselves on their own.
This might sort of be a redundant question, but what can students expect to learn from this course?
Well, it's actually not redundant because there's a lot of other thinking that's going on in behind the class. So one thing that we think about with pre-writing is that it's a process. Before you even write words down, you have to do a process of thinking through not only what you want to say, but why you're saying it, and then also how you're going to say it. Part of what we're trying to get people to do is just they often do research and they've amassed a large amount of data, but they often then don't know, okay, well, I've got so much, what should I be talking about? So just getting sort of organized in the beginning, deciding what the data itself says, which is kind of an analytic thing, and then also thinking about how do I present it, which is much more a writing process, right? It's like, what's my tone? What perspective am I adopting a first person perspective or third person? Am I talking in the past or the present? And what kind of devices am I using? Any kind of allegory or illusion or those kind of things? We're actually considering all of those things as sort of building block parts to the final product. So just the process of thinking about how to get organized and how to do the writing, and then sort of teaching the participants in the class that there is kind of a toolkit that they can fall back on when they're doing their writing. They don't necessarily have to use this technique, but we've discussed it, and it's something that they could consider using.
So, who's the course for?
So, in general, this course is open to anyone. I would say that we do expect that people have some genealogical background. We don't spend any time really in the class sort of saying to students, go out and do some research. So, we're presuming that students have already done some research. You could spend the homework, the week that we give you to do the homework assignment. Yes, you could put 10 hours or so into doing research, but then you've got 10 hours less to do your writing, and we're really focusing on the writing part of it. So the assumption is that you've already got some research in hand, although it's not a requirement. The second thing is that we don't spend a lot of time on, genealogical standards or genealogical terminology or different research approaches that people use in genealogy, but that's all kind of baked in. Like we assume that people know enough of that, that if we use those words like, oh, this is standard 69, they could go in the book and they could look it up, right? And because they'd have the book there on their shelf. It's not essential for this class, but it's one of those things, what if we're talking about it, we're hoping that people are not going to stop and scratch their head and say, wait a minute, what's that all about? I would say, in general, you've had some background in genealogy. You might be a beginner, you might be an intermediate person. A person who's an advanced genealogist, they might get something out of the class, but for the most part, they kind of know all this stuff. But yeah, even advanced people tend to get stuck on the writing part too. So it could be helpful to them to sort of think about, let me take a step back and sort of get a jump start again on why my engine isn't turning over on this project. In general, this is a skill-based writings class for advanced beginners or intermediate genealogists.
Okay, okay. So that answers the question in terms of the experience they need and any prerequisites, correct?
Yeah, the assumption, because it's a writing class and because my philosophy, my perspective on writing is that, first of all, everyone's a writer. We all have narratives in our head. We go through the world and we're narrating the world as we go along. We don't often then formalize it in writing, but those narratives exist. So in theory, everyone's a writer. The thing is that we all come at writing from with different sort of like insecurities and experiences with it that are positive and negative. We have different, ideas about what good writing is and what bad writing is. So I don't make any sort of judgments about that. We're all going to be writers. We're all going to do it sort of a different way. We all think that we have a unique voice, and that's fine. But in terms of the techniques that we're trying to teach, those are sort of independent of the voice part. And those are also independent of your experience part. So we're teaching you the techniques so that you can get a little more comfortable with the writing. We understand that you may have your own way of wanting to do it, but we want you to at least consider, in terms of the technical part, this is something that I could do, and this is something that might be beneficial for me.
Can you talk a little bit more about the course design?
Yeah, so I know that I've explained a little bit that there's these three parts to the class. And you can sort of sense it in my voice. I'm a little professorial. That's been my, I've taught in universities for 30 years, and I try not to be overly conceptual, but we do have concepts in the class, and there will be a slight amount of lecturing at the beginning. I'll show you a few PowerPoint slides, and they'll be on our Canvas website, so you can the student can refer to them, and that can help inform your work during the week. It's not going to be overly theoretical or anything like that, but we'll have some concepts that you can consider and think about. And then usually I give a prompt for the writing, and the writing can last from 30 to 45 minutes, and the student will go off on their own. Basically, we'll still be on Zoom, but you'll be in your own chat room. And I might check in the chat room and talk to you about how you doing? Are there any issues you want to talk about right now? Or I'll just let you be on your own doing the writing. And then after that, we'll come back and we'll share or not. Students are not required, they're not compelled to share their material. If some people are pretty private about what they write and they might not want to hear other people's feedback, and that's fine. But it is beneficial in some ways to have other people weigh in, because then you begin to see a little bit about how the world is looking at, do they understand what you're trying to do, and do they get the point you're trying to make, and is there another way you could say it? And so we'll have that conversation. If there's time and there's something else that we want to cover, we might go back into doing a free writing again, and then again a group session. And then you go off and you do your work for the week. And it usually it sort of piggybacks on what we just did. So it's going to be the same kind of assignment with the same concepts, but something different with your own research. And you'll do that for a week and you'll put that in your portfolio, and then we'll come back to class for the next week. The portfolios I'll go through at the end of the 4 weeks and write comments about them, and we can discuss that. And that's sort of how the class is intended. There's going to be the individual parts, the community parts, and then the more private one-on-one with the teacher.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
Oh, so many things, Margie, but, I'll try to keep it short. There's always within a writer this idea of, I've got my own unique voice and don't tell me how to do writing. And they don't want it to be overly regimented and sort of like overly mechanized and all of that. And then there are the people who sort of have this view that writing can be formalized and there are a set of techniques that you can benefit from as a writer. And we're sort of looking at that, balancing those two things so that people understand we're not trying to change you into being a machine, but we're also trying to give you some concepts that can be helpful as you move through. The other thing is a little bit kind of intellectual, maybe, but we want you to be aware of the difference between an objective and a subjective voice. The objectivity is in your data. There are many ways to talk about it, but on the other hand, as a genealogist who's a researcher, you don't want to depart from what is the truth content of it. But there's obviously subjective elements to that. What do you choose to shade? What do you choose to emphasize? What words do you choose? Those are all decisions that writers make. And we want the people in the class to be aware of these two things. There's a truth content to the information they're dealing with, but there's also ways to present it. And those are really subjective. And so that conversation about objectivity and subjectivity is what we'll have throughout the 4 weeks.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to really thank you for talking to me about the course, Todd,
Of
and
course.
letting people know about what the course is all about. And for those of you watching, if you'd like to learn more about the course or to register, just go to the JewishGen website under education and then click the link for the nitty-gritty of genealogical pre-writing. And let me show you where that is so you know where to go. On the course website, you would come over here from the home page and you would click learn. And right here, you go to online classes and then scroll down. This is really the easiest way. Scroll down until you find the instructor and find Todd, and you can click on, and right here is Todd's class, and you can click the button to register. And it's as easy as that. And Todd, again, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
And
Margie.
those of you watching, thank you. And we hope to see you in class.